Hi friends, it is Shauna from with love from vinyl.etsy.com, also at www.lovelyrusticweddings.com. I make and sell custom glitter tumblers as well as some water slide decals, which you can find at both websites. With love from vinyl.etsy.com has more of them at the moment, so if you're looking for some, that's probably the best place to start. In any event, tonight I am taping off some tumblers, sanding them, and adding epoxy, the third and final coat of epoxy. So at this point in the process, there's a lot of steps that have already taken place, and there are videos on probably nearly all of them, I think with the exception of spray painting, mostly because that's just a hot mess to try to set up the camera to. So if you want to check out my YouTube or my business page, I'm on Facebook at www.facebook.com/sweetsites. I have a lot of different Etsy pages, so I apologize for that, but Sweet Sites is where on Facebook where you can find a lot of the tutorials, and YouTube as well. In any event, so at this point you have taped, sanded, washed, spray painted, glittered, and epoxied twice for these cups. So a lot of steps have taken place. So we're on getting ready to do the sanding, the decal, and the final coat of epoxy so that the cup will be ready to ship off to its owner. And I start that by taping off with black electrical tape the top and bottom portion anywhere you want to remain untouched with the glitter and the epoxy. And I start by taping that off before I even sand anything. So this is the first step before sanding. And I just do a quick tape off, following the rim that's already there from the previous layers of epoxy. We established that line in the beginning using a pad of paper, a small pad of paper, and a pencil, creating a pencil line all the way around, and then running the first electrical tape line. I always use electrical tape. I tape off before I spray paint, and that's as quick as it is. It's bam, bam, bam. I just follow that line, and this is the step before sanding. And I tape off before I sand so that I don't mess up the stainless steel rim and create scratches and blemishes in that finished stainless steel. Some folks glitter all the way to the top and bottom of the cup, totally fine. A lot of this is you see what other people do, trial and error, see what works for you, and then you just go with it. There is no 100% right and 100% wrong way to do these cups. So what I'm showing you is just what has worked for me over time. I'm not saying it's 100% right. I'm just saying, hey, if you're looking to do this, wanting to learn, let me show you what I do. And from there, create your own method. That's what's going to make you stand out, and that's what's going to draw people to your cups over somebody else's. It's those little details. I personally tape off a small rim at the top and a small rim at the bottom on the majority of my cups. I've tried them a few different ways depending on the actual cup style. I might go ahead and glitter all the way to the top and bottom. So for example, I just did a 14-ounce coffee mug. There was no place to find a nice stop to tape anywhere, so we did top to bottom on a coffee mug. It's not going to make sense to tape off the bottom if it's a rounded bottom. Do you get what I'm saying? I can show you in a second, but I want to finish these before we start off the next step of sanding. I usually batch work. That's what I'm doing now. I do all of my taping at once. I do all of my sanding at once. Add all my decals at once. I try to batch the work so that you're on the same step for multiple cups. I have a 4-cup turner, so it works best for me to try to do 4 cups at a time. If I have more cups to do, they just wait in line at different steps of the process. If I have fewer cups to do than 4, then that's a good time to add a new design to your portfolio, shall we say. I try not to start the turner if I've got less than 4 cups, because that is always an opportunity to create something new. That's just me. So all 4 of those are now taped and ready to be sanded, which will be the next step. And then just to show you what I mean by the glittering from top to bottom, this cup is glittered all the way around because there was no good place to tape off. So depending on the cup style will dictate whether or not I glitter all the way or if I tape off. On standard 20 and 30 ounce or modern curve 20 and 30 ounces, I usually do a top and a bottom tape off. On the skinnies 20 or 30 ounce, I usually glitter all the way to the top. But again, that's just me. You do what works for you. So when I start, and I do have a video on sanding already if you don't want to watch this all the way through, I start by feeling the cup to feel where there are pokes and little things poking through the epoxy. It's been epoxied twice, so it should really just be spot sanding. The top and the bottom almost always need just a little bit. You can wet sand for this, or you can, I just take some sandpaper and dry sand and then wash it off. And you do a lot of feeling as you go. So I'm just feeling as I turn to make sure I've knocked down all of the rough edges. You're going to want a completely smooth surface to put this last layer of epoxy on. And that's what I'm trying to get right now. So I'm knocking down all of the rough surfaces as I turn the cup. I'm just feeling to make sure I didn't miss any. You can see that electrical tape is protecting the top rim of the cup while I go through and sand. And once it feels good, you can flip around to the other side. I didn't really feel anything. I'll give it a last go around before I stop, but I didn't feel anything throughout the middle of the cup. It's really just light sanding of the edges for this one, which is awesome. Okay, once you get all the way around, do one last feel, top to bottom. Once it feels good, you can, let me see if I know where my paper towel is. Normally I would spray off with alcohol, which I'm about to do. Sorry, I'm pulling my sleeves up. Spray off, oh, down it goes. I'm so clumsy, oh my goodness, if you haven't figured that out by now. I walk into walls trying to turn corners. I'm the worst. Let me grab that. Okay, so we wash off with alcohol, and then you would normally wash it down with Blue Dawn dish soap before you do your epoxy. So this one now is ready for your decal. I'm going to set it aside because I am trying to get through all of these cups for sanding before we start doing, like I said, I batched my work, so it's repetitive, and I apologize for that in the video, but I think this is probably the part we get the most questions on as far as, I want to make tumblers, how do you get the smooth edges? Sanding, lots of sanding. Don't be afraid to really get in there. It's going to dull the surface of the epoxy, and that's completely normal. Don't be worried by that. You want to get as much of the surface smooth before you put on your final coat of epoxy. That's what's going to give you that nice glass-like finish. And depending on the glitter, you may have more sanding than others. A chunkier glitter is going to require more sanding once it feels smooth along the top. And now I feel all the way around as I'm working and spot sand any places, and this one feels good too. Any places there might be glitter poking through, there might be a little bit of a, I mean, you'll know it when you feel it. It's hard to describe, but it's basically, it feels like a little poke. Not a sharp poke, just it's not a bump, I guess. Like a little mini tiny speed bump in the epoxy. You want to sand those down, knock it down smooth. This third layer of epoxy we're about to put on is going to bring back all of that shine. And you'll have nothing to worry about. Don't worry about the sanding making the epoxy dull. Sand until it's smooth. Just be aware of how deep you are going. You don't want to get into your glitter layers. Now, people who do not tape off the top will use a sanding block. I'll try to demonstrate it without actually messing up my cup. But to get the smooth top, when you go top to bottom, all the way to the top, say there's glitter all the way up to the top, you take your sanding block and you actually go along the top ridge like this, sort of at an angle, and that knocks the epoxy off of this top rim, which you still are going to clean with alcohol, acetone. After you remove this tape, you would still clean this top rim with acetone, but any of the pokes, you would angle this over and sand like this to get the epoxy clear and a smooth finish here, and that's going to help clean up your rim, which is, again, like anything with sanding usually is getting that smooth surface seems to be the hardest part as you're learning to make cups. That's what the most questions come from. So sanding, sanding, and more sanding. It's kind of like when you're, I don't know how many of you have drywall, when you're done mudding and your seams and everything are there, like if you see it before you paint, you're going to see it after you paint. It's sort of the same thing. If you feel it now, you're going to feel it after your last. Don't depend on that last layer of epoxy to fix it. Have it smooth now and ready to move on, and that'll create less work for you later. This one actually feels good too. Whew, look at us. Doing good today. Even if it doesn't feel rough, I'm going to be honest, I'm still going to go around this bottom and top edges with sandpaper just to be safe. I'd rather do a little bit extra sanding where it doesn't feel like it may need it than find out after my third layer of epoxy that I should have sanded and then have to add a fourth layer. I don't like fourth layers of epoxy. They make me sad. Okay, so we've gone all the way around. Final feel through. And then wipe down with alcohol. Oh, is that not? Sorry guys, I don't pay much attention to the camera once I start working. That one feels good. And the last. And you see that tape is saving a lot of my rim. I don't have to be too careful about where my sandpaper is hitting. That's why I tape off my rim before I start sanding. I don't want to have to worry about scratches in my cup. Okay, top feels good. Feel around. And then move to the bottom.
Good night.
Love you. You're alright. Love you, babe.
Love you too, Mom.
Okay, it's our bedtime in my house. I will admit I love that my 15-year-old still comes and gives me a hug goodnight. Okay, so I'm going to try to pause this, which I've not done before, and see if I can come back after I wash with the Dawn detergent. Hold on one second. Okay guys, now if this worked, we would have the videotaping part. I stopped taping when we finished rubbing down with alcohol, and I went and washed all of the cups with Blue Dawn dish detergent, and now we are back. They've been dried off. The tape is still on. That tape is going to stay on until we are done adding the epoxy, and we're going to add on the decals. So this bride wanted an all-white cup with a rose gold decal. So that is what we're doing. And I usually give it one last go just to make sure I didn't miss anything. I'd rather find out now before the decals added, and then there's still time to fix it. So I am adding, when I add my decals, I try to line it up. Now, I've used this font before, and I've told you guys, if you've watched any of the other videos, because this is such a handwritten font, I do not necessarily pay attention to whether it's perfectly straight. I kind of look at it like handwriting where it's sometimes angled, and I like that about it. But I do try to make it look intentional, so I don't have it like all slanted this way. I try to make it look sort of as though it was like handwritten onto the cup. And I fold the decal in the center once I have it lined up about where I want it, and I lay it out on either side as I go down slowly, and then rub it out onto the cup, trying to make sure there's no air bubbles in the vinyl, so that when I pull up the transfer paper, it should be pretty set to go. And there you have it. So that one is set. Now when I take it off, I'm going to go over these finer lines where like the E comes up and it's real thin to make sure they adhered. You don't want them to poke through the epoxy. If they do, you'll have to add a fourth coat of epoxy. So that cup is now ready for its epoxy. Okay. Probably only going to do one more just because I'm going to have to get a new piece of transfer paper for these other two because they're a little bit longer than the little piece I have here. I reuse transfer paper, so for like the bride ones I do all the time. I've got a set paper that works until it loses its stickiness and it's the right size and ready to go anytime I need it. It's going to work for this wifey one. Grandmother and godmother is a bit longer, so it's probably not going to work for those. Alright, I'm trying to remember which cup. I have two different shapes I'm working with. So that one should be good. Same thing with wifey, it's the same font. I don't know if you can see it or not, but it's the same font. So I'm not necessarily paying attention to whether or not it's 100% level. I just want it to look intentional. I don't want someone to look at the cup and have to turn their head sideways going, is that how it was supposed to be placed on the cup? Okay, so wifey is done. I know, bad lighting, guys. Eventually I'll get it right. And if... Oh, sorry, that was the sound of the... I keep, on some of my footballs, I have rubber gloves to keep it from falling off the football. That's the sound it makes as it was... Oh, we can do Grandma. That was the sound it makes as it's going on over the rubber glove on the football. Okay, so as you see, I use the same piece of transfer paper for as many decals as I possibly can. Place it the same way, starting in the center and then branching out to the sides. And then when you take it off, checking to make sure that because this is a much smaller, it's a bigger decal, but because it's a longer word, the font is actually smaller. So you want to make sure all these finer details adhere to the cup, because I have had it to where this small end of the A has poked through the epoxy, and then you have to do a fourth coat instead of stopping at 3. And that sound's going to come again as I put it on the, there we go, as I put it onto the cup turner, because like I said, once I'm done with these, we're going to go ahead and go with this. It'll probably work. Worst thing, if it doesn't work, I just got to cut a new decal, right? Okay. Uh-oh. We might be cutting a new decal. Hold on. Okay, so this transfer tape is starting to lose its sticky. So this will probably be the last set of cups I use it for. Totally fine. It's been used quite a bit. Okay. And I usually feel the cup. I don't know why. I just want to make sure that the absolute smoothest part possible is where I place the decal. And I do the same thing with every decal. I find the spot that I want it, line it up to where I think it looks good, start in the middle, and branch down from there. Okay. So that looks good. And for this one, the G came off. So the top of the G came off. So I leave it for the end, and I guide it. I follow the vinyl for that one, where it looks good. And I let the vinyl so that it lays right. I hope that makes sense. And now I'm just going through way off the camera and making sure all of the littler letters are adhered. And that is it. So that is the 4th cup. A little bit longer of a decal because Godmother is a rather long word. So if you have any questions, let me know. And if I can help with anything, feel free to message me. Thank you guys so much for watching. Have a great night.